members of the right wing do not believe that the allegations about Brett Kavanaugh and this whole debacle has anything to do with sexual assault or the mistreatment of women. In fact, people like Alan Dershowitz and Tucker Carlson believe that this is all part of a giant race war. Now, there were two specific segments on Fox News that touched on this, and I want to give you Tucker Carlson's reaction first. Now, according to Carlson, the reaction to Kavanaugh demonstrated the left's war on old white men. Carlson ran a whole segment on his show devoted to race, with one of the chyrons on screen reading, quote, "Left makes Kavanaugh hearing about race." Now, I'm going to show you some video in a second, but when did the left make this about race? Like when? Other than the very accurate statement involving the double standard in our justice system regarding accusations of sexual assault. Like, we're very quick to accept similar allegations when someone of a person of color is accused of something like this. But when you're a wealthy person, you deal with the upper level of the justice system, which affords you the benefit of the doubt. That is the only time I've heard anything about race. Now, with that said, here's what Tucker Carlson had to say. He's talking to a guest about this whole situation.
What the hell does race have to do with this case?
It has nothing to do with it, Tucker, but I mean, I think there are a couple of things going on here. Number one, what we're seeing is a phenomenon that's been happening in America over the last few years, and it has become fashionable now to be beat up on white men and whites more generally because we have this culture of spoils where we are being told that you are entitled to certain things in society and certain jobs and certain places.
Are you worried that if dumb people like David Gergen or all the rest at CNN keep up with the race hatred, that will actually encourage some kind of conflict? You've seen this in a lot of different countries. We really don't want it here. But could we get there if they don't stop?
We have it, Tucker. Oh my gosh! So on Berkeley campus across the street where I'm helping with litigation over there are places where whites are not supposed to go. I mean that is apartheid. It's apartheid on our college campuses. It's outrageous. But at a higher level, stepping back from the cultural disintegration of this phenomenon, the Democrats are seizing on any kind of club that they have handy. So if you got a white man in front of you, let's beat up on him for being a white man. If it's Carlson,
maybe it works.
Uncle Tom.
You're right. I mean, maybe it works short term, but it seems like the long-term cost is potentially just way more than we'd ever want.
Very corrosive.
Let me just mention that all 11 Republican members of the Senate Judiciary Committee are white men. So to make an argument that they're at some sort of disadvantage and this is the left's war on white men is ridiculous, especially when you consider that the first accuser and the person who testified during this during this hearing is a white woman. This is not about race. I mean, it's absurd that they're trying to pivot the conversation to this nonsensical point.
Okay, so boy, there's a lot to break down here. Let me note that, by the way, I will have a conversation with Tucker Carlson at Politicon about this later this month. So politicon.com, and then enter the code TYT to see that live. And I can give you a preview of one thing that we're going to talk about, which is that I don't know anyone in this country more obsessed with race than Tucker Carlson.
Exactly, exactly.
So what he did was he took quotes of people just noting that all 11 senators on the Republican side are old white men. Now, the operative word there isn't white, it's just a throw-in. I don't know why they threw it in. I wasn't one of those pundits, right? Old is relevant because a lot of the power structure in DC is incredibly old, and there's nothing wrong with being old. One of of course, our favorite political figure is not young either. It's Bernie Sanders. But there is the old infrastructure which has held on to power and their corporate donors, et cetera. And yes, it's also on the Democratic side. Dianne Feinstein's 84. It's certainly on the Republican side with Hatch and Grassley, et cetera. And we noted that. The fact that there are men in this context is clearly relevant. In 202 years of the Judiciary Committee, the Republicans have never put a single female senator on that committee. So when issues like this have now unfortunately arisen with some regularity. The race part is a throwaway that I think either has barely been mentioned, certainly not something that has been trumpeted on the left or done big long segments how this is a race issue. We, after over a week of covering this, finally begrudgingly talked about how perhaps they might have seen Anita Hill with a slightly different lens than they saw Dr. Blasey Ford. And that is in a way saying, well, they treated Blasey Ford fairly. So it's not even a negative connotation within that context of these hearings, right? The only one going nuts over race is Tucker.
Right.
Right? Just saying, oh, my race. And then what is that discussion of a conflict that might arise? What are you talking about, a race war?
That's exactly what he's talking about. And he's the one who is purposely pushing for that. Because again, the Kavanaugh thing has nothing to do with race. No one's arguing that this has, like, there's a racist issue here. Like, there's definitely an issue in terms of our lawmakers being out of touch. And I feel like that's been proven time and time again on a variety of issues, and certainly with the Kavanaugh hearings. But to say like, oh, this is all about race and there's gonna be a race war is insanely dangerous. And by the way, is a way of deflecting. I mean, he's deflecting so people don't pay attention, his viewers don't pay attention to the real issue at hand. And that issue is possible sexual misconduct. But by the way, Tucker Carlson wasn't the only person on Fox News who was spreading this nonsense. You have Alan Dershowitz, who appeared on Fox and Friends for a segment. Here's what he had to say.
Imagine if the situation were different. Imagine if a liberal Democrat president had appointed the first Muslim American to the Supreme Court, and somebody said, oh yeah, I remember he was a terrorist when he was 17. The ACLU would be all over this case. No, you can't presume guilt of terrorism. Everybody would be saying the burden of proof is so heavily, but when the shoe is on the other foot, when it's a white man being accused by the left of sexual offenses, all the rules are called off. The rules of presumption of innocence, the rules of due process. We know he's guilty because he's a white man, she's a woman, she's a survivor. That's the end of the inquiry.
So, curious example Dershowitz picked. First of all, I like how his mind automatically connects Muslim American to terrorists as the example. Okay, but that's okay, that's okay. Let's go a little bit further into that. Imagine if a Muslim American was appointed to or was being considered for a high post, like, for example, the head of the DNC. And they pulled up charges from back when he was in school, not of being a terrorist, but of perhaps associating with Farrakhan, who is anti-Semitic. I mean, they would never bring that up, right? A white. That did happen, and they did bring it up immediately, and both the Republicans and the Democrats joined in on the frenzy to try to destroy his career. But I mean, Keith Ellison was the first Muslim American in Congress. They wouldn't bring up any sexual issues with him. Oh, right, they did in his race currently today. You could not pick a worse example. He's in the middle of a scandal as we speak. The idea that somehow the press, the Republicans, or even corporate Democrats wouldn't bring up those issues if it helped them. I mean, it is factually incorrect on its face as we sit today, let alone you talk about terrorism. In the 50th district in Congress, Amar Kampa-Najjar is running against Duncan Hunter Jr., who's actually in the middle of a corruption scandal. And Duncan Hunter Jr. is running ads saying that Amar Kampa-Najjar comes from a terrorist family. His grandfather, who died 17 or 27, I forget now, years before he was even born, is what the charges are about. But Amar Kampa-Najjar, A, has never met his grandfather, and B, is Christian, was a youth minister. His mom is Mexican American. But according to Dershowitz, nobody would ever bring that up if he's a Muslim American, or even people if they think he's a Muslim American. They thought Obama was a Muslim American. They went after him, even though he wasn't Muslim. You couldn't pick a worse example. But you know why they do it? Because in their minds, they're like, oh my God, we used to get away with everything. Now they're nitpicking us, and now we're under a microscope too? I mean, Muslim Americans, you think they're the ones that are powerful in this country?
Yeah.
I mean, what, are you insane? No, they're the ones you pick on a regular basis. Now, basically what he's doing is he's crying because, oh, what, now we have to apply the same standards that everybody gets to white men? To white men? We're gonna apply the same standards? An outrage. Where's the race war?
Yeah. By the way, just to be clear, if there were somehow miraculously a Muslim Supreme Court nominee and there were credible allegations against that person, I would also want an investigation. But remember, Dershowitz brings up the issue of due process. Obviously, this is not a criminal investigation. Kavanaugh is not going to get convicted of anything. This is about a job, right? This is about a job. So let's go back to the facts and realize this is not about a criminal prosecution. This is about further investigation to figure out whether or not someone has any right to be at the top of our justice system. By the way, due process. Okay, due process would mean that you investigate the allegations to either clear the person's name or find out if they're guilty. But the Republicans didn't want the due process. The Republicans were the ones who were skirting the issue of an FBI investigation from the beginning. It was Trump's White House that tried to limit the number of witnesses the FBI could speak to during this very short 1-week investigation. And it wasn't until they were pressured into expanding the investigation that they allowed the FBI to speak to more witnesses. So you want to talk about due process, the only people that are trying to do away with due process in this case are the Republicans.
So lastly, let's also note, quick aside, that Tucker's guest, Dylan, civil rights attorney, hilarious, said that there are certain places on Berkeley's campus where white people are not allowed to go. Is that true? Of course not. Just another thing that's made up by the right wing. There was a proposal in 2016 that there be spaces of color. Now, I'm not sure that I agree with that proposal, but it's basically like an African-American group getting together and saying this is our student group, and so we'd like to have a private meeting, right? How dare you? White people are being banned at Berkeley. Okay, and it didn't even, to the best of my knowledge and what I've read today, it didn't even pass. So, oh my God, it's begun. They're discriminating against white people in Berkeley. Okay, so look, they force us into these conversations. So I don't know of any African-American group, Latino group, Asian group, or anyone planning a race war. Who are the only people who have talked about race wars? The shooter in Charleston, South Carolina, that shot up a black church, talked about a race war. Several different right-wing shooters actually, and this doesn't get a lot of press coverage, in their manifestos talked about race wars. I don't know anybody on the other side talking about race wars. I do know several right-wing killers, murderers, mass murderers who have talked about race wars. And I know Tucker Carlson talking about race wars. And Tucker, remind me, if there was a war against any particular race in this country, which one it was against? I'm pretty sure it was against African Americans. Which race enslaved the other race? Which race took away the other race's rights for hundreds of years? No, look, I know that you're aggrieved that you cannot do it anymore. I know it bothers you to your core that some of the things that you cherish, like being able to oppress others, is slowly, way too slowly being taken away from you. But no one on our side is talking about starting any kind of race war because that's mental. And we're not holding people to account for what happened hundreds of years ago. But if you're gonna have a conversation about if there was a race war in this country, well, there was one. And it was done to black people in this country. It was done to Native Americans in this country. So don't pretend that all of a sudden, like, oh my God, white people about race and again being discriminated against. Your group, and I don't mean white people, I mean conservatives, right-wing zealot conservatives, oppressed different races in this country for hundreds of years. So you don't get to turn around now and pretend you're the aggrieved party here. And my God, what if there was a race war? There already was one, Tucker. And it was your right-wing brothers and sisters who did that race war and enslaved and lynched and murdered people in this country for hundreds of years. So at least please have the decency to shut up about it. The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.